Hey, and welcome back. I know some of you had probably expected to see another video yesterday, but as it turned out, I had another project that I needed to finish before I could get to more Kingdom Death. It's not that I forgot the project, I just, in my mind, placed it in the wrong order in the queue, and then noticed that it should be this should be completed before these were. So I did that yesterday, but I did manage to get started on the survivors as well once this was complete. So we can perhaps take a closer look at those. So I have some guidelines that I'm using, like a photo reference, which I will show you if I can dig it up, if I can remember to dig it up as I'm doing this. Future me, please find that photo and post it here. But it shows a very tanned survivor, a guy with a kind of otherworldly look to his flesh tone, and then some relatively tanned females. Now, none of these are done, obviously, and I have been working on the flesh tones, and the flesh tones here are mostly done. He is interesting. I actually like it. I've been trying to experiment more and get out of my comfort zone when it comes to flesh tones recently, and this was kind of a nice opportunity to do that. So the base color for that was Warcolors Flesh 5, which has it's a really interesting dark flesh tone, but I mixed in a little bit of the transparent purple, or is that violet? Violet transparent, to get what you can see is a very blue undertone. And then I mixed up various lighter shades with Flesh 2. Then I went back over it with a very thin mix of brown 2, just in the shadow areas to better define those. And I think it pretty well matches the reference photo, and I like it. I like it. It's interesting. So this one, I started with. I have a. It's not really a custom mix, but it's a custom thinned. This is Joe Sonia Earth Brown or Earth Red. I can't remember which, but it's a red brown. It's a pretty standard red brown. And that was his base coat. And then I mixed lighter versions of it with Flesh 2 and Flesh 3. And he became too Caucasian. Like not nearly as tanned as I wanted him to be. And so I washed over him with a thin mix of brown 2, which brought him back down again, super tanned. And I'm probably going to go back and punch it up a little bit with Flesh 3. Very thin highlights of Flesh 3. Flesh 3 is a little bit more orangey, so it should help keep the tan, whereas Flesh 2 is, you know, getting close to white. So I think that's going to be good. But we can actually look a little bit about, because in this one, in this survivor, I actually while I did start with the same Joe Sonia red brown, I went straight to brown 2. And now I'm mixing that with Flesh 3 again. That's these two to get the brighter colors going. But she's nowhere near done. But you can already see that her overall feel is a lot more kind of tan flesh. And this one just has the initial base and I think maybe one highlight done with the airbrush. So she's got a ways to go. So in order of completion, it looks like that. And once I get the flesh done, then we'll move on to other things. Probably eyes will be next. Now, these are extremely realistically proportioned miniatures, which I like for the most part. But when it comes to doing eyes, it can be challenging. So definitely going to be using the magnifier on that. I use the magnifier on anything, on everything. Oh, and I did the undercoat for their wraps, which is just German field gray, which is a very green, kind of olivey green color. And I used the this Vallejo version. You know, it's interesting. The last bottle of this that I had a weird consistency to it, and it eventually just died. Like the pigment and the medium would not make friends again. And I'm having similar initial problems with this, whereas this has got a weird consistency right from the start. So I'm actually considering, because this is already too thick to begin with, I'm considering mixing this down with some of my Liquitex medium and making a sort of pre-thinned version, sort of like what I did with this. The Joe Sonia paints come out of a tube, so they're obviously pretty thick right from the get-go. So this has been wonderful to work with. This is essentially airbrush thickness, but I've discovered a long time ago, not that long ago actually, more like 2 years ago, that airbrush thickness for me is about perfect for brushing. So yeah, anyway, moving on, I am gonna go, oh yeah, actually there was one more thing. 1 second. Okay, I just wanted to point out that some of you might have noticed, I know at least one of you did, that these 3 minis, Butcher, King's Hand, or The Hand, and what was the third one? I can't remember what they're all called. Anyway, these 3 minis were all mounted on the small bases, and they should have been mounted on the large bases. And specifically, a user named Spiderweb or Spitterweb, depending on on whether or not you want to assume the vowels in his name or not. He pointed this out to me. So I pulled these guys off the little bases, and I'll be mounting them on the big bases, but I think that they look a little lonely on those bases, so I'm probably going to add some simple cork ruins to these bases. It'll end up bringing them up a bit, but it'll also provide more visual interest. It won't be like he's sitting in a pond all by himself, or themselves, since there are 3 of them. I think this is the one that looks the loneliest on that base. Anyway, I don't think I'm going to exceed the boundaries of the base. In fact, I won't, because I know that the size of the base matters. Oh, I can even see this is like 4 square inches right here, and that fits perfectly within that. Anyway, it'll be interesting. One of the things I thought about doing, and if I hadn't already mounted these figures on these bases, I might have done, is to create a mold of this surface texture. You know, the face masks, the sculpted faces. And you can do it just a simple push mold with green stuff. And then I could have cast more shards of that could have gone on that base. In looking at the bases though, because I could still just pull one of these off, but looking at these, the way these are set up, they look like they're meant to be on a disc, right? All the faces are sort of oriented in a way that provides this kind of circular pattern, and I wasn't sure how well that would look. But I might change my mind as I'm working on these models, and maybe even just do a little bit, like one section of it, so that maybe I could just add little bits here and there. Yeah, I probably will. So anyway, that's something else that I'll be doing. But push molds are really simple. You would just take up a little bit of your green stuff, roll it into a ball, and then kind of mash it onto the surface that you want to make the mold of, and then let it cure out. Once it's cured, you pull it free, and then you have your mold. Then you essentially do the same thing when you want to cast it. You would just take up some more green stuff, or you could even use whatever. You could use resin, you could use plaster. If it's the green stuff, then you're going to carefully push it into that mold, let it cure out, and you're done. You are probably going to want to put some sort of, what would we call that? Mold release in both instances, both on the base before you make the mold so that the green stuff doesn't stick to the base, and then on your mold when you're pouring or pushing your material to cast in there. And if I do that, I will probably wait till this evening. We'll see how far we get with painting on these, because I want to let the green stuff sit overnight to cure out, and I don't want to have to be continually handling it. But anyway, that's just something I'll be thinking about as I move forward. Onward! So I've been doing some more touch-ups on the flesh colors. He's pretty much done at this point. But more importantly, I've been working on eyes. I don't know. Let's see if it'll focus. Let's try this. I don't know if you can see, the eyes are so small, and I don't think it would be possible for me to paint them if it wasn't for my double magnifier. I did a review a little while back, a little short review of a magnifier headset thing, but it actually has two lenses. It has the main lens, and then you can just throw down a second one to kind of double the magnification. And in doing these eyes, I definitely needed that secondary lens here. Without it, pretty much impossible for me to do those eyes. My eyes just aren't that good anymore. But with that magnification, I was able to do it. And a fresh Rosemary and Company #0 brush, which is my eye brush. In fact, I broke out my last fresh one. The other one that I've been using just doesn't have the same point anymore. Still good for doing most details, but not for eyes. At least not for these eyes in particular, because they are so fine. The nice thing though is they're well defined, and I find that is the most important thing for me to do eyes well. If the eye is not well defined, it's really hard for me to figure out, where everything goes. But these are very nicely, very nicely defined. So anyway, on to completing the flesh tones. Very tanned. Yeah, just gonna keep working on those, and I'll come back and show you where I am. So yeah, I'm really starting to barrel on through with these guys. Got all the hair done, got all the flesh done, got their wraps done. Now the wraps were, as I said earlier, started with field gray, German field gray, World War II color, uniform color. But then I lightened that with Ochre 1 from War Colors, and that was all the way up to just using that straight for the highest highlights. I really like how that came out. And what else? Like I said, did the hair color. Her hair color was Red 5 base, and lightening that up with, I think, Ochre 2 or 3, maybe a little bit of both. And, oh, you know what? Actually, I should back up a bit, too. So with the females, I was concerned that their flesh tones weren't as smooth as I might like for my women. My women's. I like the flesh tones on women to be smoother than on men, and it wasn't getting that with the brush. So I actually went back with the airbrush and airbrushed highlights onto the women folk here, and I really like how that comes out. I've been doing more and more fine work with my airbrush, even though my super fine airbrush, my Micron, custom Micron, is currently out of commission because it needs a new nozzle. Because last winter it disappeared into my carpet, and it's smaller than a grain of rice, so there was no discovering where that went. And frankly, I've been doing it since I do about 99% of my work with the Eclipse anyway. I wasn't in a hurry to replace the cone because it costs, like, it's this tiny thing, and it costs $40. So I've been getting better and better about doing fine work with the less fine airbrush, which you can do. You can do a lot of super fine work with an airbrush that is, not necessarily of the finest tip. But it does take a little bit more work to kind of perfect that. And what I've been discovering is that there is this happy medium between thick and thin with your paint. It's when I want to do fine work, my paint is thicker than I would normally mix it for general purpose spraying. And then you also want to up your the pressure that you're shooting. And it can be nerve-wracking because, of course, there's always that feeling that, if I just do this wrong, I'm going to totally screw up the work I've done so far. But like anything else, it just takes practice, and the results are worthwhile. So I got some really nice smooth highlights on on the women, and it was so good that I was very tempted to go back and do the guys. But you know what? I like how their flesh came out with the brush, so I'm not going to do that. At this point now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint their lanterns, and they're little shards of floor mask thing that they are all carrying. And then consider maybe a little object source lighting from the lanterns. But that is another area where it's very, like, do I really want to do that? Because I could really screw things up. Because I like to do it with airbrush, because airbrush kind of solves a lot of problems when you're doing object source lighting. It's hard to do with some things, but the basic idea being that if you can get your airbrush pointed in the direction that the light is coming from, the paint is going to fall where the light would fall. And so it just simplifies the whole process. It's really nice. But like, for example, with this guy, he's holding this thing so close to his leg that getting the airbrush in a good place to do that might be problematic. And in fact, what I probably should do is do it before I paint the lantern. That is something to consider. Because that way I don't have to worry about screwing up the lantern by doing the source lighting after the fact. So I think I'm going to have to give that some thought and decide what I'm going to do. I have another batch of these guys coming soon. And a second Phoenix, maybe third Phoenix, waiting in the wings as well. So I'm going to be doing a lot of Kingdom Death Monster minis in the near future. Anyway, let me get some of this done, and we'll see what happens. We'll talk about it, and I'll be back. So at this point, they are done, with the exception of the bases, of course. That should be obvious. I did end up doing some glow, very light bit of orange from the airbrush, and where they had the lanterns close to the body, I added some yellow as well. But I didn't do a lot with that. I don't like doing a lot. I don't like going very heavy on source lighting, because for me, if you wanted to go really heavy on source lighting, then you should have sort of the model just be painted and lit on one side and dark on the other, and I don't want to do that. Because then the model only looks good really from one direction. I have seen it done really, really well, and it is pretty cool, but not what I was going for here. Anyway, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take, I think this one, yeah. And I'm going to make a little push mold of this part of the base using some green stuff that I have already mixed up. And I just need to grease it a bit. And I'm going to use, this is the lubricant for my airbrush. It's really, I think it's just glycerin. And this is going to keep it from sticking to the base. Let's see. Flip that over. I think I need to reshape the green stuff a little bit. There we go. All right. Now I probably should have put some release on this side as well. All right. Let's try and keep it off of that foot. So we really just want to push it down into the detail there. hopefully without trapping any air bubbles. But with this kind of mold, you know, you're just kind of going to take what you can get. And we'll just let that set until tomorrow, and then I'll show you how we use it when that's all done. But for now, I think we're gonna call it done, because I'm not sure what I'm gonna do next. I think I might move straight on to the Phoenix before I do any of the other ones. You know, knock one of the big projects out of the way. And then we'll have, so maybe I'll do the Phoenix and then the Watcher and then the 3 smaller figures. But that is going to end this video for today. And thanks again for watching. I noticed that the Kingdom Death monster videos have been pretty popular. So, hey, again, thank you all. And I hope you're getting something useful out of this. I know I'm not doing proper tutorials, but right now I'm not set up for the tutorials. So, and I need to get this stuff done. I really want to get this stuff done before the end of the month. I actually have 3 more projects on top of this that I need to get done before the end of the month, and so the more time I spend on this one project, the less time I have on my other ones. So I'm doing what I can, and right now this is it. But yeah, keep an eye out, and I will have more videos for you in the near future. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you later.